They thought it was just a Bible story, a warning told to scare people into obedience. But now, in one of the most lifeless, unforgiving places on Earth, scientists have found something they can't explain. A towering figure made entirely of salt, shaped like a woman turning her head, and standing in the exact place the Bible says Lot's wife looked back. The Dead Sea shimmers in the morning light, so still it looks like glass. The air here is heavy. It stings your eyes, clings to your skin, and carries the sharp taste of minerals. This is where two ancient cities once thrived, Sodom and Gomorrah. According to the book of Genesis, they were destroyed in an instant, fire and burning sulfur falling from the sky. Lot and his family were warned to flee without looking back. But in the middle of the chaos, his wife turned her head, and right there, she became a pillar of salt. For thousands of years, people believed it was just a moral lesson. But then, high-resolution satellite images of the southern shore of the Dead Sea picked up something strange. A solitary column rising from the barren landscape, not jagged like the other salt spires in the area. Smooth, tall, almost perfectly human in proportion. When researchers arrived on foot, the desert heat was brutal, the kind that makes every breath feel like it's burning your throat. They stood before the pillar and saw something unsettling. The surface glittered with salt crystals, but underneath were thin, dark bands, mineral layers fused together under intense heat. Layers that don't form here naturally. If stories like this fascinate you, there are countless more waiting. Subscribe now and let's uncover the world's most haunting mysteries together. The ground around the site told its own story. Just beneath the dust was a thin sheet of glassy rock, smooth like it had been melted and then frozen in place. This kind of formation only happens in extreme events, like meteor explosions or atomic blasts. And this wasn't scattered randomly. The melted layer wrapped around the base of the pillar, almost like the figure had been caught in the middle of it. Local Bedouins have spoken of the woman who turned for generations. Most outsiders thought it was just folklore, but when scientists drilled a core sample from the pillar, they made a discovery no one expected. Microscopic sulfur crystals embedded deep inside. The kind of sulfur that doesn't rise up from the ground. It falls from the sky, born in the heat of a massive firestorm. And the concentration here was far higher than anywhere else in the region. 3 kilometers away, in what used to be a Bronze Age settlement, excavation teams uncovered more strange clues. Pottery shards that weren't simply broken, they were warped, almost as if they'd been softened before shattering. Inside one sealed jar was a handful of barley, charred black but perfectly preserved. Radiocarbon dating placed the destruction around 1650 BCE, the exact period many historians associate with the fall of Sodom. But there was something even more chilling. Buried in the soil were tiny grains of shocked quartz, crystals that only form under pressures stronger than any volcano on Earth. The same mineral has been found at asteroid impact sites. Whatever hit this place wasn't slow or gentle. It was sudden, explosive, and powerful enough to wipe entire cities from the map in seconds. The team returned to the pillar with drone-mounted scanners to see beneath the crust of salt. What they found made their hair stand on end. Beneath the uneven outer surface was a shape too precise to ignore. A sloping shoulder, the curve of a neck, the outline of a head turned sharply to one side. The proportions matched those of an adult woman almost perfectly. And then came the most unsettling detail of all. The scans showed a dense, irregular core inside the pillar, darker and heavier than the surrounding salt. Some experts think it could be remnants of organic material, possibly the remains of a human body crystallized in an instant. Others say it's just an unusual mineral deposit, but even they admit they've never seen anything like it in the region. Geologists reviewing the evidence, the melted ground, the sulfur crystals, the warped pottery, the shocked quartz, began piecing together a possible chain of events. They believe a massive object, likely a fragment of a comet or asteroid, exploded in the atmosphere over the Dead Sea Valley. The The blast would have been hotter than the surface of the sun for a split second, instantly igniting everything it touched. The shockwave would have flattened buildings, incinerated crops, and left only ash and minerals behind. And if a person had been standing in the open, if they turned back at just the wrong moment, they might have been frozen in place by the minerals blasted into the air, locked in salt for nearly 4,000 years. As the team scans the surrounding cliffs, their instruments pick up something else, a cluster of smaller salt formations, half buried under shifting sand. At first glance, they look like wind-carved pillars, but their alignment is precise, too precise. They form a rough arc, like the layout of a small crowd frozen mid-motion. If the blast theory is correct, these could be other victims of that same cataclysm, obliterated in an instant and hidden in plain sight for millennia. A second survey sweeps the area for chemical traces. The readings spike, sulfur levels far beyond even the Dead Sea's already extreme mineral content. One geochemist mutters that it's almost as if a chemical storm once ripped through this place, coating everything in a rain of burning ash. Beneath the topsoil, they find a hardened layer of white and black bands, each just millimeters thick, a perfect geological timestamp of heat and violence layered across the land. In a nearby cave, the researchers stumble across something they hadn't been looking for: fragments of carved stone, blackened and pitted. One block bears faint marks, not random scratches, but deliberate etchings in an ancient Semitic script. Experts later confirm it to be a fragment of a boundary marker, the kind placed at the edge of Bronze Age city limits. If it's authentic, this isn't just the right region. It's possibly inside the territory of the city the Bible calls Sodom. As the excavation expands, they uncover evidence of extreme human displacement. Buried under the blast debris are skeletal remains of goats and sheep, scattered as if herds were caught mid-flight. Many of the bones are fractured in ways that suggest a sudden concussive force, the kind caused by shockwaves, not predators. In the midst of this animal carnage, a single bronze ornament emerges, a pendant, crudely shaped like a palm tree. The craftsmanship is consistent with early Canaanite culture, dating to the same period as the destruction layer. Then, the discovery that freezes the team in their tracks. A thin shard of hardened salt, unlike anything else around, is found wedged between two boulders. When tested, it contains microscopic traces of collagen, a protein found in skin and connective tissue. This is the first biological marker they've detected in any of the formations. It doesn't prove human origin, but it doesn't rule it out either. While scientists race to analyze these samples, historians dig into the archives for more than just scripture. They uncover records from the Jewish historian Josephus, who claimed to have personally seen the pillar of Lot's wife still standing in his time around the 1st century A.D. Roman military maps place a distinct landmark in this same region, labeled simply the Salt Woman. Even early Islamic texts describe a solitary figure of salt on the shore, considered a warning to travelers. The legend, it seems, never vanished. It was simply waiting for someone to connect it with the evidence. But the most unsettling twist comes from the sky. Astronomers begin combing through historical models of meteor and comet paths. They find that around the estimated time of the event, a massive object may have broken apart over the Middle East, scattering fragments across the region. One chunk is believed to have exploded directly over the Dead Sea basin, releasing energy equivalent to hundreds of Hiroshima bombs. Computer simulations show the blast wave funneling straight through the valley where Sodom and Gomorrah would have stood, and directly over the location of the pillar. The heat at ground zero would have been almost beyond comprehension. Wood would ignite instantly. Stone would crack and melt. Flesh and bone, exposed in the open, could be desiccated to nothing in moments, replaced by a crystallized shell of salt and ash. In that context, the Bible's description is no longer unthinkable. It's terrifyingly plausible. Yet for every answer, new questions tear open. Why was this one figure, The pillar, left standing when everything else was obliterated? Was it pure chance, a quirk of wind and debris shielding? Or was there something about her position, her movement, that caused the minerals to fuse exactly around her? Researchers note that the base of the formation is angled slightly toward the northwest, the exact direction from which the blast wave would have struck. And there's another mystery. A geophysicist analyzing the subsurface scans notices faint voids, hollow pockets, inside the pillar's core. These could be natural fractures, or they could be the last empty spaces where softer organic matter once was before it mineralized. If true, the internal cavities may hold tiny relics, hair, cloth fibers, even fragments of bone, perfectly sealed for thousands of years. Security around the site intensifies as whispers spread that the pillar may be subjected to full core extraction. Religious leaders clash with scientists over the ethics of such a move. For some, the pillar is sacred, a living monument to divine judgment. For others, it's a priceless scientific artifact that could rewrite our understanding of biblical history. And in the middle of the storm, the desert wind still sweeps across the pillar's surface, carrying tiny salt flakes into the air, fragments of a mystery the earth has guarded for nearly 4 millennia. Then, as the sun drops low over the Dead Sea, the drones scanning the area make one final pass and spot something just beyond the main site, a shadow where there should be none, a second, smaller formation, leaning forward, almost like a figure frozen mid-run. Its proportions are different, shorter, broader, but its position, facing away from the blast epicenter, mirrors the flight described in Genesis. Could this be another witness to the same moment, or the remains of someone else who, like Lot's wife, never made it to safety? When the excavation team moves in, they find the ground here fractured and unusually soft. Digging deeper reveals not just bones, but crude symbols etched into them, jagged lines matching markings found on artifacts thousands of miles away. Experts insist such carvings belong to cultures that should never have crossed paths, yet here they are, locked together in the same layer of soil. The air around the dig hums with a low vibration no microphone can capture, though every witness feels it. A sudden storm rolls in. Lightning strikes the excavation site 3 times in under a minute, each bolt hitting the exact same spot. Cameras catch it, and in the split second after each strike, the symbols seem to glow. Beneath the skeletal remains lies a shard of metal, warm to the touch even in the cold night air. The trail to trace its origin leads to a sealed military warehouse where crates bear decades-old stamps, though guards swear they arrived only weeks ago. Inside, identical shards are cataloged alongside handwritten notes referencing an unrecorded detonation off the coast in the late 1960s. The notes hint at a vessel pulled from the depths, a vessel that, according to naval archives, never existed. Photographs from the time show the wreck split open like it had been bitten. In one image, a shadow looms in the water behind the divers, too defined to be a trick of light. The photographer vanished days later, leaving only a diary page smeared with seawater and a single line. It followed us back. Tracking the vessel's route led investigators to a lighthouse abandoned mid-shift. Plates still on the table, the lamp still burning, but no sign of the keepers. In the logbook's final entry, a single phrase repeated 21 times, "Don't let the light go out." Beneath the lighthouse floorboards, a hatch opened to a narrow tunnel leading directly to the shoreline, and to a cave hidden behind black rock. Inside the cave walls, carvings matched the bone etchings from the dig site exactly, but here they formed a complete sequence, as if telling a story. The last carving showed a jagged circle with tendrils reaching outward, encircling a ship. A fresh layer of dust coated the ground, but one set of footprints was recent, and they led deeper into darkness, where the air was warm, as if the ocean itself was breathing. Miles away, a derelict research station lay half-buried in snow, its communication tower bent like a straw. Inside, the walls were lined with reels of magnetic tape, each labeled only with dates. When one was played, The static hiss gave way to what sounded like hundreds of voices speaking in unison, languages overlapping, some known, others extinct for centuries. One phrase emerged clear every time: "The signal is not for you." Meteorological logs from the same period recorded a spike in electromagnetic activity over the Arctic, yet no storms were reported. A scientist's final note in the station's records claimed that the sound waves from the signal physically altered the ice structure, patterns forming that matched the same tendrils carved into the cave. Before the note ended, a second, shakier hand had scrawled, "It's already under us." The last leg of the investigation took place in a coastal village whose population had vanished in a single night, leaving doors open and fires still burning. Fishermen's nets hung frozen mid-haul, the ropes stiff with salt and something else, a thin, iridescent residue that shimmered even in shadow. Lab tests returned impossible results. The material was organic, yet carried traces of metals not found on Earth. Under a microscope, the strands appeared to move, contracting and expanding as if breathing. Old maritime charts from the village archive showed an area of the sea deliberately marked over in ink, with only a word scribbled beside it: "Unmoor." When the ink was tested, it wasn't ink at all, but blood, preserved impossibly, without decay. Then came the final breach, divers descending into the black waters just beyond the inked mark. Their cameras caught structures beneath the waves, not coral, not rock, but towers, twisted and leaning, as if they had been pulled down from above. A figure moved between them, not fish, not man, but something with a shape the eye couldn't hold on to. The feed cut abruptly, but the last frame before blackness showed a familiar jagged circle with tendrils, the same one carved into bone, into cave walls, into ice, glowing faintly on the ocean floor. The coordinates from that final frame pointed far inland. The wind here carried the taste of salt and ash, as if the air itself had been scorched and preserved. In the distance, the barren plains seemed frozen mid-scream. Twisted ridges, jagged black stone, a landscape that whispered of something unnatural. Every step closer felt heavier, as though the earth resented being walked upon. And then, there it was. She stood alone, her back eternally turned toward the path of escape. A column of stone, carved not by tools, but by a single act of defiance and fear. The figure was unmistakable, shoulders drawn, head slightly turned, the faint curvature of what had once been a human form. But the details were wrong, too precise, too human, as if this was not erosion's work, but a moment in time that had refused to move forward. For centuries, people have called it Lot's wife. The story says she disobeyed, she looked back, and in that glance was judgment. But standing here, with the wind howling through the empty valleys, it feels less like punishment and more like a warning. Because scattered around the base of the stone are shapes, fractured, half buried in the earth, that look disturbingly like the remains of others. Bent limbs caught in mid-motion, faces eroded but still carrying something you almost recognize. A local guide speaks in a low voice, as if afraid the figure might hear him. He tells of travelers who came too close, tracing the stone's surface with their hands, only to vanish from their camps that same night. Days later, the guide says, new shapes appear among the rocks. He laughs after saying it, but it's the kind of laugh people use to hide fear. You start to notice he never once turns his back to the figure while speaking. Far beyond, the wasteland stretches toward a jagged horizon where, in the right light, you can see something shimmering, as though heat rises from a fire that's been burning for thousands of years. But the air here is cold, unnervingly cold. A thin mist clings low to the ground, moving against the wind, curling toward the stone figure like smoke returning to its source. Some geologists claim it's all coincidence, mineral formations shaped by millennia of erosion, salt deposits hardened by ancient lakes. But even they hesitate when asked why the figure stands in perfect proportion, why the surface bears fine striations resembling the folds of fabric, why the eyes seem hollow yet deep enough to swallow light. and none of them can explain why compasses here twitch and spin, or why recordings taken within 10 feet are almost always corrupted, filled with a low, pulsing hum. The hum grows louder as you stand there, not with your ears but inside your bones, like the echo of something vast beneath the ground. Some say it's the earth remembering, others that it's the moment she looked back, still replaying, caught in an endless loop. Your mind begins to fill with images you didn't invite, flashes of fire rolling over the horizon, a sky turned black with smoke, the sound of thousands of voices in unison crying out, not in pain but in shock. And somewhere in the chaos one figure turns, just slightly, enough to see what should never have been seen. Enough for whatever rules govern this place to close around her like stone hardening in water. The guide's voice breaks the spell. He says it's time to go. His steps are quick now, his eyes fixed ahead. You feel it too, that subtle shift in the air, the sense that the figure behind you might no longer be where you left it. But you don't turn to check. You can't. Not after the way the ground seemed to hum louder the longer you stood there. As you walk away, the wind changes. It's faint, almost nothing, but it carries a sound, high and brittle, like salt crystals breaking under pressure. The guide doesn't speak again until the figure is far behind, lost in the haze. Only then does he tell you that some nights, when the moon is low, the outline on the ridge seems different. Not the familiar stance, but something closer. Facing the road, and though you keep walking, a part of you knows the truth. You didn't need to see the city's destruction to understand why she turned. Curiosity is a hunger, and hunger, when strong enough, can make you forget every warning. The mist follows for a while, curling between rocks, before fading back toward the figure. You tell yourself it's just the wind, just the way air moves through broken stone. But deep inside, a thought lodges itself like a splinter. Not painful enough to notice every day, but impossible to remove. Because if she turned for just a heartbeat and was caught forever, what happens to the ones who keep looking, even now? The truth is still out there, and it's closer than you think. If this story gripped you, hit like, share it with those who need to know, and subscribe for more hidden history and untold mysteries. Your curiosity keeps these stories alive.